Welcome to the Line Movement MMA betting show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom from MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today, we're going to be taking a look at this upcoming card this Saturday night between Derek the Black Beast Lewis and Alexei the Boa Constrictor Olynyk. And real quick, for all our Canadian listeners, make sure y'all place your bets at blitzbet.eu. Our American listeners, stay tuned for further news. And Dan Tom, let's get right into it, man. The heavyweights in the main event this weekend. It's scheduled for 5 rounds, but I have a feeling it might not go past the first.
Yeah, man, heavyweight affair in the Apex main event heavyweight affair, as you said, Dan. That means five-minute rounds. I'm not sure. The over and the under set like this is a 2-round fight for a reason. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, is it as simple as saying Lewis by KO or Oleinik by sub? I mean, am I being too simple here, or do you think that there's a more complex way to look at this?
I'm not the simple guy in that sense. I don't like to stereotype things, striker versus grappler, Dan. But for those who use the word true outcome fight, a true outcome fight, this could be one of those, Dan. Whether we're talking about obviously Oleinik by KO, just kidding, by submission, and of course Lewis by KO, that old KO King tattoo that really doesn't get talked about that much. He does, however, have that thunderous KO power, so it could very easily be a 2-outcome fight.
And I'm really glad that you said Oleinik by KO. I know it was a slip up, but I'm glad you said that because Olynyk's knocked people out too. I know you remember when Olynyk was out there with Jared Rosholt, who at the time had a reputation for probably being the most boring fighter in the UFC, and Olynyk slept him in the first round. So do not sleep on the knockout power of Alexei Olynyk, but they call him the Boa Constrictor for a reason, Dan, and he's got 59 wins. 46 of those 59 wins are via submission, Dan Tom.
That's right. And of all of his finishes, 45 in the first round. So usually he gets it done early, as you probably would stereotype with submissions, right, Dan? What's the old adage? While they're dry, it's extra dangerous. So that those first rounds are going to be really treacherous waters to trudge through if you're a Derek Lewis fan.
And no doubt about it. And for Lewis, I mean, they don't call him a knockout artist for no reason. Out of his 23 victories, 18 of them are via vicious, devastating knockout. And you know for a fact, when Black Beast gets you, he gets you.
And he gets you from like losing the fights. He could be down on the scorecards, Dan. He's not your typical first round brawler. In fact, you could argue, regardless of what the scoring and the momentum of the fight is going, that Derek Lewis is more dangerous toward the end of the fight. I don't know if it's that same Yoel Romero vibe, but he's definitely got the dangerous vibe throughout.
And no doubt about it. And it's funny that you mentioned he's a bit of a comeback kid, because right now when we look at the odds, he's a minus 200 favorite. And it's not often you got to pay that kind of chalk on a guy who's known for coming back in fights, a guy who's known for going down to the wire if he can't get that first round knockout. The thing is, if you are to take that underdog shot on Alexei Olynyk, I know I personally will be praying for a first round submission, because every second on the feet, I will be sweating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Oleinik off the top of my head is 73 fights, and I want to say he's only seen the decision. You know this saying, Dan, 9 times to court Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 73 fights, which is pretty insane. And hopefully we do get to talk about that underrated striking, which, you say I'm glad you're glad that I brought up. You brought it up, sir. So I'm glad you brought that up, because he has shown underrated striking, and both guys have shown kind of underrated form. But before I get too ahead of myself, let me just kind of cap this point off that I am showing my hand here, Dan. I am picking Derek Lewis here. But the point you brought up about the odds, minus 200 odds, those aren't necessarily giant odds, even for a heavyweight fight. Although I always say, start squinting when it goes over a 2-1 spread, folks. That being said, I get nervous because despite being a Derek Lewis fan, Dan, as an analyst, I seldom pick against him, or I seldom pick him, and it's bit me in the butt. Thankfully, I don't play his fights too much, really, but I usually pick against Lewis. Now I find myself picking Lewis, and at a time where, like you said, he's got a minus 200 price tag. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right to me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's tough to lay chalk on a guy like that. Even though I did it his last fight against Latifi, expecting a first-round knockout, and then I had to sweat that until the last second when he finally, in the third round, he made the decision to go for the Black Beast blitz. You know what happens when he starts turning up. He starts doing those flying knees. I mean, a guy like that, you look at him, you don't think he's that athletic. Then he's out there throwing head kicks the whole nine. And you mentioned the decision stat for Alexei Oleinik, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I want to add to that point and tell you what Derek Lewis numbers are when fights go the distance. Out of 31 pro fights, he's only been the distance 6 times, Dan Tom. So I'm pretty damn confident this one's not seeing round 5.
Yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing is with Derek Lewis is that on the feet, unless it's with something rogue, we really don't see him stop that much. But which we'll talk about with some fighters on this card, even fighters that haven't been stopped. And of course, Derek Lewis has been stopped by strikes, but he gets hurt a lot on the feet. And we kind of both hinted at Olynyk striking. You go back to that Verdum fight. Now, Olynyk, the common thread with Lewis is that they both have shown better shape. Olynyk came in at 227 in his last fight, Dan. The last time Olynyk came down to 227 pounds, you got to go back to an M1 fight in 2012 against Jeff Munson. So, sure, the guy might have fought at middleweight or 205 against names like Chael Sonnen back in the day. Relevantly, he's not been at this weight for a long time, whether it's, getting over injuries with the help of doctors in that South Florida scene. We're seeing a lot of guys looking healthy coming from that American Top Team camp, not hating, just stating. And you got to wonder, is this a new and improved Olynyk? Because not just that, Dan, forget any of the reading between the lines of what I'm saying. What he showed us against Verdum, really underrated boxing and clench boxing. He's always been nasty with the uppercuts and dirty boxing, but we saw almost like Sugar Ray Robinson type stuff, pawing down the guard to open up his shots, things that guys really don't do in MMA very much. Olynyk looked like a new man at 42 or 43 back at UFC 249. Again, I'm picking against him here, but I totally can get why someone would be enticed by this underdog shot.
No doubt about it. I mean, he came out a man on a mission his last fight against Verdum. I think he realized, look, this is the biggest fight of my life. I have a big chance to get out there, get a signature win over a former UFC champion, a future Hall of Famer, the guy that dethroned Cain Velasquez, the guy that ended Fedor's win streak. And to credit your point about the weight, I mean, it's not, an opinion. It's 100% fact because he weighed 238 against Maurice Green. Next fight against Verdum, 227. And oftentimes, if you talk about a heavyweight that weighs 227, I know for a fact you're thinking, hey, man, maybe it's time to go down to 205, but not in this guy's case. With him at 227, that's what Alexei Oleinik considers the best shape of his life, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And he gets after that. He still seems to retain his strength. Ultimately, I just have a hard time seeing him get the submission. I think he's going to give us a lot of scares. I break down in depth on MMA Junkie my breakdown on Lewis. He likes to do that tripod. It makes it hard to get his back. And even though I'm picking Lewis, and I have a hard time seeing Olynyk even being able to skewer Lewis if he does get him down, Dan. That being said, like if Olynyk's on top and side control, I could actually see him like getting Lewis with something like a scarf hold. I'm not hitting on a scarf hold, Dan. I'm a catch wrestling guy. It's a legit position. But you get what I'm saying with Derek Lewis's kind of demeanor. Like I could see him giving up a submission like that more than like a more legit or high percentage submission like a rear naked choke. Perhaps that's just what I'm seeing. You?
I mean, if it's some random guy going out there again, a scarf hold and not just the position, but turning that into a submission, then I'm like, yeah, okay, Dan Tom. But when you're talking about Alexei Oleinik, that's what he's known for. I mean, he went out there and schoolyard headlocked Mirko Cro Cop. One doesn't simply schoolyard headlock Mirko Cro Cop. And when you look at the numbers, which I got in front of me right now, Lear Latifi took down Derek Lewis 3 times. Blagoy Ivanov took down Derek Lewis 3 times. Daniel Cormier took down Derek Lewis 4 times. Volkov got a takedown. Marcin Tybura got a takedown. Shamil Abdurakhimov got 4 takedowns. So the bottom line here is that the Black Beast can be taken down. However, what happens once it hits the mat? That's what I want to know because to your credit, I mean, he might give up the back on the way up, but it's not often that he gets choked out from that position either.
Yeah, absolutely. And the takedown stats are really interesting. I'm not going to discredit it. It's very relevant. And I'm kind of almost an anti-stat guy. You could call me contrarian Dan, but those stats are really relevant. However, I went back to look at the takedowns, and not spending too much time on this, Dan, before we move on here. I just want to state that all the takedowns were a common thread like this. Unless you were a high-level wrestler like DC who had a good single leg, DC always talks about making the big guy balance. Those takedowns are very effective at heavyweight. Almost all the takedowns that all those gentlemen landed were the exact same takedown, Dan, and that was from the body lock and an outside trip. It's a very old man takedown that Olynyk can hit. However, Olynyk never really hits those, so that kind of worries me, and it also worries me Olynyk from early Olynyk to late stage Olynyk, he's always been willing to drop down, almost like he's Damian Maya, for half guards and guard play. And I don't like that, considering Derek Lewis gets most of his finishes when the guy, when the guy's on the mat and Derek Lewis is on top of him. So something to watch for there.
Look, in Oleinik's last 5 fights, he's only landed takedowns in 2 of them. He had 3 against Maurice Green and then 1 against Mark Hunt. But granted, that one against Mark Hunt, 1 takedown, the fight was over shortly after. So he could do something like that here. And there's definitely a chance for Oleinik to win this fight via submission. However, if Oleinik gets him down and Lewis can survive and kind of make Oleinik use up a lot of that energy, once they get back up to the feet, and like I alluded to earlier, the Black Beast Blitz, once that happens, I'm not quite convinced that Oleinik survives. I mean, we saw one blitz from Walt Harris go ahead and put him down, and we know that when Oleinik starts to get tired a little bit, I question his ability to push through those hard moments. So while I do think the early going might be a little sketch, especially if Oleinik gets a takedown, maybe he gets the sub, ultimately I'm going to have to go with Lewis to find that chin somewhere along the way, Dan Tom.
I agree. In fact, we could see an early finish like the Walt Harris one. Walt Harris landed everything from that left side. I don't know if he landed it too cleanly with his flying switch knee, but Derek Lewis has a really good flying switch knee and switch kick that'll be right in line for a dipping Olynyk that's worth watching for. I agree with you otherwise.
Main event of the evening, we got the return of the former middleweight champion, Chris, the All-American Weidman, and he's taking on Omari Akhmedov. And I'm going to go ahead and read off the odds because currently they got Chris Weidman minus 135 with a plus 115 comeback on Akhmedov. And just to let you know where this line opened, Dan Tom, it actually opened minus 150 for Akhmedov. So in a way, it's flipped. I mean, now you're looking at Weidman the favorite, and obviously Weidman's got the bigger name. He's got the credentials. He's the former UFC champion, and this is his first non-top 10 opponent in Lord knows how long. I mean, every single guy that Weidman's been fighting, winning, or losing against have all been in the top 10 except now against Akhmedov. And interestingly enough, Akhmedov, he's undefeated at middleweight. He's on a massive win streak. He's been doing his thing. And this is a big step up in competition for him. And, people are saying this is the UFC's version of telling Weidman, hey, here you go. Here's a guy outside the top 10. Get back on track. But I kind of view it like, hey, Omari, your hard work and determination has been paying off. Here's your chance at a former champion who's been knocked out in 5 of his last 6. Which one do you see it as?
That's super interesting, man. Let's put it this way. I agree with the opening line, Dan. And the public, which again, we talk a lot about trends, and it's kind of my favorite part of this show, Dan. I think we do a pretty good job about it, staying up to date with this week to week pandemic trends, if you will, pandemic fights. And there's multiple trends at play here, right? And there's one, which is the line we just spoke of, Dan, and that you just cited off the top. We're called line movement here, and I don't know about you guys watching, but I know we've been doing pretty well, fading the public in certain spots. Not that it works every time. Everything is a case by case scenario. Nothing is guaranteed. That being said, looking at the evidence, the public have been wrong a lot of the times. Another thing that's at play here, Dan, and it's going to be at play for perhaps another middleweight matchup, is guys cutting weight and killing themselves coming down to a weight class, whereas guys like Akhmedov, who, yeah, even though, Sergio Moraes or Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, especially at those last hurrahs of their prime, were very dangerous guys who don't get enough respect. But yes, I could see how to the naked eye, this guy's getting stopped. He got TKO twice. Like, no, this was down at a weight class. He wasn't the same, which will be something we'll probably revisit here. And I don't know about you, Dan, but I tend to like these guys in this pandemic era, short notice bookings. I mean, amongst all short notice bookings, we were talking, peeling back the curtain, folks. Me and Dan were talking. This card has a lot of intangibles, and out of all the short notice bookings, this has some of the shorter bookings on there. So I'm liking guys that aren't cutting as much weight traditionally versus the guys that have traditionally killed themselves to make the weight. They're getting a shorter camp to do it. That being said, on the Weidman side of things, Dan, I know I'm throwing a lot here, but the other canary in the coal mine, this is something we spoke about. Experience and grappling edge have been coming through as well. And you could argue that's on Weidman's side. Experience as far as UFC and grappling as far as wrestling and submission grappling credentials. Of course, Akhmedov has got some good, solid combat, sambo, and pancration credentials, but you can argue both submission wins, styles, and credentials. Weidman holds those check boxes. So two different canaries of the coal mines at play, Dan. I guess I'm bouncing it back to you. Do any of those have legs? Are you looking at any of these things going into this matchup as well?
Of course. I mean, look, if I were to take the underdog shot on Omar Akhmedov and I looked you in the eye with a straight face and told you, I'm not worried about Weidman's D1 wrestling. I'm not worried about Weidman's jiu-jitsu black belt. You know, that'd be complete BS, right? Because of course you're worried about his one path to victory that he has in this fight. And also, I feel like, you know, his stand-up is a bit underrated in the sense that, you know, Weidman's very long. He's got a deceptive range and he can get that jab out from a ways out. I mean, he's got what, a 78-inch reach, so he's going to have the size advantage here for sure. It's just that, you know, something that we talked about recently is the delusion of the long reigning champion. And, you know, shout out to Shogun Hua, because he's the one guy who, he doesn't have such a big ego that he's you know, still sitting here talking about how he can dethrone the current champions. You know, Shogun Hua, I haven't heard him ask for a John Jones rematch. Shogun Hua's like, you know what? I'm at the end of my career. Let me fight John Vellante, Paul Craig, the Lil Nog trilogy, Tyson Pedro, all these guys that would have been nowhere near my level a couple years back, but now we're having competitive fights with these guys. Let me fight those guys, because I understand that if you put me in there with Yuri Prohaska and with all these top guys, that I'm going to get killed. Whereas Weidman, the delusion you hear from Weidman, the guy's been knocked out in 5 of his last 6. You hear him saying stuff like, I can be the guy to dethrone Israel Adesanya. I can be the guy to beat the great John Jones. It's like, Chris, no, you can't, buddy. So I think it's a situation where there's so much ego and denial. And finally, he's taking the step back in competition. But it's like, dude, been knocked down in 6 consecutive fights. It might be too little too late. You should have taken that step back 3 fights ago. You're only doing it now. And I think it might be too little too late, because one thing about Omari Akhmedov, and yeah, he hasn't officially knocked someone out in a while, but like, Ian Heinisch is a young, hungry guy. Ian Heinisch hasn't been knocked out in 5 of his last 6. Ian Heinisch can take a punch. And I saw Ian Heinisch get wobbled by the hooks of Omari Akhmedov. And I'm telling you right here, right now, on the Line Movement MMA betting show, Dan Tom, Omari Akhmedov cracks Chris Weidman with one of those left hooks clean on the chin, he's going to put him down and get his first knockout win in a while.
Or the right hook follow-up, or the right hand, then the left hook follow-up. They come in pairs. They're very simple, but they're very effective. And that's kind of the main thing you got to do against a guy like Weidman, no matter what iteration. Even pre-knocked out Chris Weidman, what's going to be his toughest matchup? A short, stout, power-punching guy that hits. And you're right. He hasn't gotten a knockout since 2013, since his UFC debut. I could see people pointing to that, being like, hey, he hasn't gotten a knockout. You know, you can point to that and be negative, or you can point to that and go, look at your watch here and be like, I think he's overdue. I think he's overdue. Because if you look at Omari Akhmedov's face, if you look at his face, I mean, this guy looks like he's been, you know, duking it out with Team America since 2005. But the truth is, the guy's only been fighting since 2010. He's only 32 years old, so he's still right in his prime. And he could be right in his dead set fight miles prime too, with those lessons already learned. Again, we'll talk about guys learning their lessons early, having to learn their lessons on a UFC stage, learning their lessons in a weight class they probably should have never been in. I mean, you talk about, you mentioned Ilir Latifi being surprisingly big. Even though I didn't see him giving Derek Lewis trouble, I could totally see why you would have taken that shot. Still, he's a big guy. I remember it was the UFC 223 in Brooklyn, and that crazy card, Dan, right? One of the craziest UFC cards next to last week. And I go into the hotel lobby, and I'm like, oh, there's Ilir Latifi, and there's like a heavyweight standing next to him that looks like Ilir Latifi. Oh wait, that's Omari Akhmedov. Like, and there was a bunch of fighters in town and bunch of fighters in that fighter hotel lobby. And Omari Akhmedov looked like the biggest one. And when I came through with a pizza order for some buddies I was meeting there, I thought I was gonna have to just like give it up to him like it was prison. You know what I'm saying? Like, take it, just let me live the way he was eyeballing me. This guy's giant. He should have never been in that division. So I would be careful condemning what could look like a low action, an unsuspecting character, if you will. I think Omari Akhmedov is very live in this spot, and the point of entry is very takeable. He's going to be my pick, and I don't blame anybody for looking to play Omari if you're getting dog odds out there.
Again, back to the criticism of Omari not knocking people out. I mean, let's examine the last couple of people he's fought. Marvin Vettori. What's the one thing Marvin Vettori has been known for? I mean, you see Marvin Vettori against Izzy Adesanya. Izzy lands every shot in the book and doesn't even wobble him because he's got that blockhead. You look at a guy like Zach Cummings. Dan Tom, has Zach Cummings ever been, praised for his athleticism? Has he ever been praised for his, speed? No. He's always been praised for his durability. He's always been praised for the fact. You remember that Ponzinibbio fight where he ate every single shot, the same shots that knocked out all those other people? This guy is durable as hell. Ian Heinisch. How many times have you seen Ian Heinisch stiff on the canvas? Zero. So I just feel like he's been fighting these guys that are so damn durable, and now he's fighting the corpse of Chris Weidman. So I feel like this is the recipe to get that first knockout in a long time. And also, obviously, look, if you're taking the shot on Omari, yeah, we don't want Chris Weidman on our back. We don't want Chris Weidman to full mount us, of course. The guy's still got the grappling credentials. It's just that I don't think he can push the same pace he used to push. I mean, even in that Jacare fight, and back to the delusion I was talking about, because I mentioned how he said, oh, I can be the guy to dethrone Izzy. I can be the guy to dethrone John Jones. And I'm saying he didn't say this 5 years ago, Dan Tom. He said this after being knocked out in 5 of his last 6, right? And yeah, I get being confident, but like you got to be realistic too. So, man, it's one of those things where I'm very curious about how Weidman comes in here. But what I wanted to get to was the other point I was making is that he's saying, like, the other part of delusion is that he's saying, oh, I was winning all those fights and then I just got caught. Like, it was just a walk in the park. I was owning these guys, no big deal. And then I just got caught. Like, that is not what happened. The Yoel Romero fight, yeah, you won the first round of a 3-round fight. You lost the second round. You got brutally knocked out in the third round. Against Jacare Souza, you won the first round. You lost the second round. You got brutally knocked out in the third round. How does that equate to I was winning the whole fight and then I got caught? I just don't get it. And to me, not only is that delusional, but it's a sign of lacking accountability because, not to say a real champion, because Weidman, he's got 4 UFC belts at his house. No one's going to take that away from him. But a self-aware individual would be like, okay, and then in round 2, that's when I started slowing down. That's when Jacare started landing some hard shots on me. Third round, he really picked it up and knocked me out. But instead, it's like, oh, I was owning him the whole time like it was no big deal. And then he just caught me. I got caught. Like, remember Chuck Liddell when he got knocked out every single fight at the end of his career? I got caught. Like, that's all it was, right? It's as simple as that. I just got caught. So I don't buy any of that BS. I don't think it's a matter of you just got caught. I think it's a matter of, sorry, Chris, but you're kind of washed up now, buddy.
It's tough, man. It's like in his defense, you mentioned this too, Dan. In his defense, all fighters have to be confident. I don't want to ever criticize a fighter for that. However, there's a lot of undeniable truth to what Dan is saying, folks, and that is, and again, there's a lot of parallels to perhaps the next middleweight fight we talk about, but in a different way. In the next one, the common thread, I guess, what I would say is that championship mentality, what you basically went off on, Dan, which is that whether it's a championship mentality that I can't be beaten and now you've been knocked out in your 5 year last 6, when you tie something, when you put all your chips in a basket, it's kind of a dangerous principle in life, but especially in MMA, especially mentality was, because if the thing you put all your chips in, whatever you justify your wins and your losses for, when that gets taken away from you, man, it's a lonely place, and the bottom drops out real fast in this game. And not only have we seen it with the 5 of the last 6 stat that we keep beating you over the head, but people who've been watching tape, and Dan, I know you're one of those, so you can join in and co-sign here. This trend started before Weidman started losing, folks. Like, you can go back and even look at the Vitor fight or the Machida fight. In both fights, you can hear, if you turn up the volume in between corners and after the fight, he got cracked so hard by, again, counter fighters, fighters who can hit hard off that counter. He forgot rounds of the entire fight of the Machida fight, the last half. He didn't know if he won or not. And even when he decidedly won against the Vitor fight, he's still checking in his corner, asking him what happened. Like, there was disturbing signs, folks, before he ever even got stopped. So not only does the bottom drop off hard, it's been dropping off longer than perhaps the record shows with Weidman.
Yeah, and look, I wanted to save this line for half the battle, but since you got me fired up, Dan Tom, I guess I'll go ahead and say it here on the Line Movement MMA betting show. Make sure you follow us at line_movement. Go to linemovement.com. Say it on both. So everyone's talking about how Omari gasses every fight, but they fail to mention that Weidman gets knocked the fuck out every fight. So I'll go with the conscious guy in this fight. Omari Akhmedov is my pick.
And last thing, as far as and I was one of those people that was fading Omari, but, and again, folks, I'm not trying to throw shade, but whether the truth hurts or not, we have to be honest, right, Dan? And again, this isn't shade at all. A lot of the South Florida camps are doing a great job. Whether you look at Dos Santos, Oleinik, whether it's these older guys that are coming up in great shape, whatever they got for strength and conditioning, you know what I'm saying, at American Top Team. And since Omari has moved over there, which he's been training at, his cardio has gotten better. You look at the numbers and stats. Again, I'm not a huge stat guy, but they are very useful within the proper context. And you look at it, he's throwing and landing more upward trajectory like this. It's going consistently upwards in his last 3 fights. One of the 3, which you mentioned, Dan, Ian Heinisch, who not only does Ian Heinisch seem like the guy you can knock out in the first round, and then you have to fight Ian Heinisch's autopilot for the last 2 kind of a guy, but, he doesn't get tired. If there's going to be a guy that's going to take advantage of a fader, it's Ian Heinisch all day, baby, and that did not happen. And Ian Heinisch can wrestle as well, albeit not as strong a submission grappler, obviously, as Weidman. The one thing I'm going to look at before I go and make a play, or this would end up on a betting sheet or anything like this for me, Dan, I haven't done it yet, admittedly. I have to go back and watch the 3 takedowns that Ian Heinisch got on Omari Akhmedov. And what I'm going to be looking for is how he got up. Does he get up lazily like Kelvin Gastelum that can let him Weidman into the fight? That might be the only thing that worries me, but I'm pretty confident to say that Omari is going to be my pick. He's already my pick for MMA Junkie staff picks.
I was watching that fight earlier today, and okay, so he does, turn away and give the back, but got elbow to knee. You know about that elbow to knee defense to not let the hooks get in. So, I mean, guy's solid. He knows what he's doing. So, yeah, look, I'm not delusional. I know that if Weidman wins this fight, it's either going to be a wrestling heavy decision or a submission. So, I don't recommend putting your whole bankroll on it, but like, if it's just a system play for you to know, like, hey, Chris Weidman fights in the UFC, I'm going to have money against him, period, point blank, because at this point it's profitable to fade him, especially at dog money. Doesn't win fights in this day and age, period. So I would recommend taking a small shot on the dog here, personally.
And nothing personal against Chris, but I agree with the analysis here, man.
Yeah, nothing personal at all. I mean, I was there when he knocked out Anderson Silva at UFC 162, and the whole place went silent. It was unbelievable. And
history,
man, he was an amazing champion. He defended the belt 3 times, I believe. 3 times against Anderson with the leg break, the Machida fight, the Vitor fight. He had a good run, but I mean, that fight against Luke Rockhold was so brutal. He just hasn't been the same since. So it is what it is. I mean, we don't bet with our hearts, right? I don't know Omari personally. I don't know Weidman personally. It is what it is. You're giving me dog money to fade a guy that's been knocked out in 5 of his last 6. I don't care who the competition is. People are like, it's only top 5 guys. It's like Luke Rockhold gets knocked out every fight too. So don't even try. It's not like the top 5 of today. It was the top 5 of yesterday's division. So I don't care what people are saying. I only care about what I see on tape.
I don't care what people are saying. I ain't hating on Chris, and I definitely hate. I'm not hating on the public, Dan. If they keep doing what they're doing, let's just say, or what they've been doing for this pandemic era, keep on doing it.
In the featured bout in the middleweight division, this is a great fight because we got Darren the Dentist Stewart taking on Maki Coconut Bombs Pitolo. And something I really like about this kid, Maki Pitolo, speaking of self-awareness, Dan Tom, this is a guy that had zero business at 170 pounds. And for whatever reason, he fought at 170 pounds. And man, when you talk about some of his knockout losses, they were vicious. And when you look at his fight against Callan Potter, it's like the dude can barely move in there. The dude can barely think in there. Like, you're like, man, is this guy even a UFC caliber guy? And then you see his next fight when he moves up a weight class, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, so that's the coconut bombs everyone was talking about, man. And damn, it's like his physique looks so much better because the guy's cutting from 215 pounds. And Dan Tom, you know firsthand how tough Hawaiians are. And not just Hawaiians, but fighters in general. Some of these fighters, they need the right people around them because they're too tough for their own good. They're super stubborn. They think they know everything. And Maki Pitolo had this fight against Takashi Sato booked at 170 pounds. And during his weight cut, you know, this guy cuts from 215 pounds. He's trying to get down to 170. UFC medical staff, they intervene. They're like, Maki, no, man, like, we can't let you get down there, buddy. We don't want to have to drag you onto the scale. And then, you know what I mean? So basically, they're like, Maki, let's go to the hospital, get you some IV fluids, and we'll book you to fight another time. It's not going to work out this time. And you know what Maki Pitolo does, Dan Tom? Gets to the hospital, and he says no to the IV because he still wanted to weigh in. That's how tough this guy is. And they're like, nah, Mackie, it's all good, bro. Take the IV. We'll book you for another fight. And I think it was at that moment where he realized, like, I need to move up to 185 and just be done with it because, like, especially the kid's undefeated at 185 pounds. And at 70, it's like he's had these brutal losses. He's had glimpses here and there where it's like, man, he's a well-rounded kid. He can wrestle if he needs to, but obviously his multi-strike combinations, also known as coconut bombs, is basically what got him in the position he's in and why he's such an exciting fighter to watch. But make no mistake about it, Maki Pitolo can wrestle too, as you saw in the 3 takedowns he landed his last fight. But at 185 pounds is just such a different guy. I mean, he can move out there. He can think out there. He can fight out there. I mean, you see his fight against Callan Potter, and it's like, if I know for a fact that's the Mackie I'm getting, I'll max bet fade him every single fight. I'll bet anyone against that guy. It's just that we're not dealing with that guy. I think he finally realized, like, if I want to make any kind of run whatsoever, if I want to change my life and have a successful career in the UFC, I got to fight at 185 pounds. He finally made that decision. I mean, look, Contender Series, he won at 85 too, right, Dan Tom? So I think he realizes now, this is my weight class.
Yeah, man. I was there at that Contender Series fight, and I was even there at his catchweight fight before that back in Hawaii when he fought Chris Cisneros in that rematch. Now, the weight cut intangibles, which we paralleled with middleweight, we talked about Omari Akhmedov. Also, speaking within that parallel and not condemning guys for their losses, you know, again, you not just looking at who they fought, because yes, Darren Stewart has fought better guys and he has more UFC experience. But I would argue they're not too far along the experience levels, and the same things you could condemn, you know, Darren Stewart for that some people may condemn Pitolo for. Perhaps they're unfair. Perhaps these are learning lessons, because not just the weight, which is valid. You go to Victory FC on Fight Pass. They do a good job, Dan, of tracking their weigh-ins and what they rehydrate to. Like you said, fighters are stubborn, but they also talk a lot. This wasn't just talk from Pitolo. The numbers don't lie, and he would show him weighing in. He would make the 168 mark or 170, but he averaged no less than 20, sometimes upwards of 21 pounds of rehydration just 24 hours. That is insane. And even though I'm maybe closer to the 5'9" side of 5'10", whereas Pitolo is right at that 5'10" mark, I can tell you as a Hawaiian, man, we are heavier bone. Life's just not fair as far as the weight classes go. There's a reason why Mark Hunt is pretty much the same height as me and Maki Pitolo and has made a freaking name for himself at heavyweight, okay? I would be on death's door, Dan, when I had to cut for grappling or kickboxing or MMA when it was the 140s or the 150s. I ironically did my best, Dan, at 160s and 170s range, okay? And now, you know, after a bunch of weight cutting and having that behind me, my body did the whole post thing where now I'm hanging out at around 200 pounds. So to see a muscled athlete like Pitolo, yeah, I could easily see him weighing at 210. So that isn't hyperbole, folks. But yes, he was probably experiencing his own learning lessons, because even though name for name, if you look at actually who he was fighting, like Chris Cisneros, who, by the way, goes back to like the Show XC old school Hawaii days, BJ Penn black belt. If you look at actually guys he was facing, or even guys he was supposed to face Jordan Jackson, was it or Jason Jackson? I'm sorry, who is coming into his own in Bellator. You know, Maki Pitolo was actually supposed to face him, gets a short notice replacement. And I'm tying this together because if you look at his losses, it's a guy that he just beat. The reason why he fought a guy, he gave him that chance. I don't have the name in front of me. Cassius or something.
Cassius Kane.
Cassius Kane. That's right. He gives him a chance. That guy might not be jump on your radars, folks, but he trains with Anthony Lionheart Smith and notable MMA people. He actually comes from Muay Thai. He's a legit Muay Thai striker. In fact, sure, he might not have faced the most notable names prior to that Pitolo fight, but 3 of his stoppage losses were stoppage wins were by submission. Submission to strikes, folks. You don't often see that. You would see that old school record keeping. That's been washed out now. You have to be probably a can, which that might have been the case, sure. But B, you also have to hit really hard to make a guy, even at the regional level, Dan, realize faster than maybe he was already going to realize that he doesn't want to be in there. So that guy hit hard. But what does he do in the first fight before he gets knocked out at a weight class he shouldn't have been? What does Pitolo do, Dan? He goes and wrestles for 5 rounds. First of all, Stewart has trouble going 3 for the more experienced guy. Stewart has never gone 5, where I don't even think has been scheduled to go 5. Maki Pitolo has and showed he could. You know, sure, he can pull stunts here or there, but he's one of those guys like Kevin Holland who you got to break his arm like Kevin Holland got his arm broken. What does Kevin Holland do? He starts working behind a jab and winning rounds. You're like, thank you, Kevin. Why did you have to get your arm broke to do that? I think Maki Pitolo kind of has that same gearing. So a short notice fight between the weight cut, fighting at the right weight class, not having to cut that weight, what we just talked about with that Weidman and Omari kind of parallel there. But not only does he have that, on the other side, you have Darren Stewart, you shouldn't condemn him off his losses. I didn't. I cashed against a Sprinkle and Bevon Lewis I can't take credit for, but also against Darren Wynn against a wrestler. I am definitely not discrediting the skills of Darren Stewart or his improvements. However, here's what worries me. You talked about that championship crux, Dan, that Weidman had, and when you're not championship and your foundation gets brutalized with 5 out of 6 stoppage losses, what do you lean on then? It's dangerous to put your eggs in one basket. Well, Darren might be doing that too, Dan, because when you listen to him crediting on the way on his winning streaks, when he's racking them up, he's saying, it was my cardio. It was my cardio. And there's truth because you go and look at his Instagrams like I have before all these fights, Dan. What's the main thing in his camp that he's focused on? This is a guy that's months out. He's wearing the heartbeat sensors. He's monitoring. He's logging every day. He's getting everything on point. And to his credit, he has shown that. He's only got a 3-week camp and he's had to drop an insane amount of weight already. Go look at his Instagram. You can see the pictures. You can see that he's dropped weight. You can see that this is a big guy that used to fight at 205 pounds, and perhaps his future could be at 205 pounds, but he's having to drop this weight. And you even go read the captions, a little glimpse into the psyche. He's saying, it's a tough weight cut. It's already been tough. I still got tough ways to go, but we're going to get through it. Sounds like the guy's more worried about his weight cut than the actual fight. Will he make weight? And if he does, I think he's going to kill himself to make weight. We've seen the how strict the UFC is. They're not cutting these guys breaks. He does not have incentive to miss weight. Nor do I think Darren Stewart is that guy to purposely miss weight. So whether he makes weight or not, I think Darren Stewart is and will be killing himself to make weight, which will only bring back those gas tank intangibles. Long-winded there, Dan, but do you see me connecting the dots? Did you connect similar dots, or am I crazy?
Oh, I mean, it's like they're heading in opposite directions. Like one's cutting too much and one's finally letting his body breathe. You know what I mean? One's finally like, hey, let's stop with these 45-pound weight cuts, Dan Tom, 215 to 170. Like, are you effing kidding me right now? Right? Like it like almost makes sense why he looks so bad against Callan Potter. Because the Callan Potter fight, like I said, I know I already said these exact words, but he couldn't move in the Callan Potter fight. He couldn't think, he couldn't react, he couldn't fight, most importantly. And then you see him at 85s, it's a completely different guy. And with Stewart, so yeah, obviously he's gonna have a hard weight cut, but the thing I want to talk about is his skill set. And one thing we cannot deny about the dentist Darren Stewart is that the dude hits like a truck. And can never count him out of a fight because the guy has that serious one-punch knockout power. Like the Charles Byrd fight, he's losing every minute of that fight. One elbow to the temple, and that's all she wrote, baby. You know what I mean? And even against Edmund Shabazi and losing the entire fight. And now we already know Edmund's got some suspect cardio past round 1 because he goes so damn hard trying to get that finish. Well, in round 3, Stewart had Edmund dead to rights. He wasn't able to capitalize. He ended up getting taken down 4 times that round, which is something else we're about to talk about here in a sec, is wrestling or lack of. But one thing, though, Stewart hits hard. Mackey's been knocked out more than once. So the KO path to victory is 100% there for Darren Stewart. And if Darren Stewart goes out there and wins this fight by knockout, I can't say I'm surprised. But I'll tell you what will surprise me, Dan Tom. Darren Stewart goes out there and outworks Mackie Pitolo, I'll be shocked. Darren Stewart goes out there and puts on an MMA clinic against Mackie Pitolo, I'll be shocked. If Darren Stewart goes out there and submits Mackie Pitolo, I'm walking away from the TV. So I think it's a situation where, I hate to use the words KO or bust because this guy is a serious knockout artist and Mackie has been knocked out before, but I don't see Darren Stewart winning a submission. I don't see him winning a dominant 3-round decision. The only way I can see Stewart winning a decision is if Mackey's winning most of the round and then he gets dropped at the end of the round or something like that. And then they edge that round to Stewart type thing. But I do not see Stewart outworking Mackie Pitolo at all. And people view this fight as 2 brawlers. Yeah, it's fun to, generalize and categorize a fight between Stewart and Coconut Bombs, the dentist and Coconut Bombs as 2 brawlers. But dude, I saw Mackie Pitolo get 3 serious takedowns his last fight. The one you mentioned, he went out there, wrestled the guy the entire fight. We know Stewart can't wrestle. Stewart's never been able to wrestle his entire career. His last 2 fights, he's been taken down probably over 10 times combined. So I feel like if Mackie, if shit's going kind of sketchy on the feet, and Mackie can go in there, level change, take him down, pick him up, high amplitude takedowns, and rinse and repeat. People just don't know about that part of Mackie's game, but it exists too. But what I think is that he can grind them in the early going, and then once they get back up to the feet and Darren's a little bit tired, then he can get off on the Coconut Bombs. And what I like about the Coconut Bombs, because I know that's a really cool name, it sounds fun, it's trendy, it's hip. Oh, Coconut Bombs, this and that. But let's talk about what we're actually looking at. Coconut Bombs, aka multi-strike combinations, aka off speed to fastball. So this guy will go out there and he'll kind of throw a couple soft ones, a couple change ups or curveballs if we're talking in baseball terms, off speed pitches to kind of get your hands raised, and then he'll rip 3 hard ones to the body 100%. So he's going up 30%, 30%, 30%, then 100%, 100%. So it's you don't get the timing of what Mackie Pitolo is doing. Now 170 you did because he couldn't move or think, but at 85 it's a different story. So I feel like Darren Stewart's got to counter him with the perfect shot to knock him out. And when you look at the odds right now, some action did come in on Mackie Pitolo. Some sharps did get in on that. But right now it's -155 for Stewart, Pitolo +135. So for a non-pick'em fight, when the favorite's path to victory is only a knockout, I feel like you got to take a look at the dog there.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that. And for those feeling like we're not giving enough credit to the knockout path, absolutely. Even at 185, can Mackie Pitolo be a hit? Does he get off the slow starts? Does he have a style where he can be standing in front of a guy like the dentist a little too long? Absolutely. All three of those things are absolute worries. That being said, it's one of those things where you did a great job expanding on the body work. And Darren Stewart's not a brawler either, to your point, Dan. He can box. He goes to the body too, but it's not as good as Pitolo. And again, you know how much I love body work, Dan, and especially against guys who cut weight, against guys who do good body work. I am all about that. But more so, if I were in Stewart's corner, I would be whispering, go leg kicks. You remember that Bevon Lewis fight where he comes out almost in that karate stance and he just starts abusing legs and he's getting him to do the stance switch move in the first frame of within the first 2 minutes of the first round? If Darren Stewart came out and did that, we haven't seen anybody test Mackie Pitolo's boxing-centric stance with leg kicks. That's tale as old as time in MMA, right? You got the Diaz guy, go leg kick him. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you get Diaz Cerrone, but the point is there's a path there. The problem is, even when Darren Stewart does do that, you get the conditioned Darren Stewart, which we're not going to get here, like in the Bevon Lewis fight. But let's say we get that. Even in those conditions, you go back and watch that Bevon Lewis fight, Dan. What does he do as soon as he starts getting Bevon Lewis to switch stances and hurts him with a leg kick? He clinches him. He clinches him. What did he do in his last fight, the most relevant fight against Bartosz Fabinski? After he defended the takedown and he got the underhook and then he spun Fabinski to where Fabinski was in the weak position against the cage. Did he break off any of the times that he did that? No.
He went for takedowns of his own. I was like, what?
Yeah, he clinched him and he got himself tired. So whether Maki wrestles and makes him, which is smart, and like you said, people don't realize Maki Pitolo came up playing football and wrestling, folks. That's why he's so athletic and so explosive. He's got underrated hips. He's actually won gold at expert level in Naga, which is nothing to scoff at, especially as a pro MMA fighter, which most of those guys, they have the ego that's too fragile. They don't want to get subbed by some nobody or whatnot. So even though Pitolo doesn't have a jiu-jitsu rank, the wrestling and the grappling skills that I've seen are really good. Even Callan Potter, let's bring up that fight. Even Callan Potter gave him credit. He goes, hey, man, when I usually get on top position, Callan Potter, judo and jiu-jitsu black belt, say what you will about him, most guys are done when I get him in those positions. He said that guy is really good. And by the way, that's your UFC debut where you're going all the way to Australia. Oh, by the way, and like a record crowd of 60,000 audience in attendance, not even something all UFC fighters get to experience. Like that's your UFC debut on somewhat short notice. Forget about the whole weight cut thing that we already delve into, Dan. Like that's not a fight people should condemn him for. But yes, back to the leg kicks. Like, so even if he does test him or do these things, is he really going to can you trust, Darren Stewart on a full tank or not to expound upon this? And last thing I'll bring up here is I'll bring up Bobby Green versus Francisco Trinaldo. I think I might have picked Green, so I might have been wrong on that fight, even though it could be contentious on how you score it. But going into that fight, I said, this will be a fight, especially with Bobby Green as another boxing-centric guy who needs to almost be hit to wake up like Pitolo, right? I said, it'll almost be good if Bobby Green gets rocked early, because if he survives it, it's going to put him at a projection to win the rest of the fight, because Trinaldo, who is better at his gas management, still has that propensity to gas, right? And Trinaldo, even at 41, more reliable, more skills than Darren Stewart. But still, what did we see? We kind of saw that play out. Trinaldo ended up still winning because he was a veteran and had the full tank. All these things that Darren Stewart isn't really going to be able to rely on. But the point is, I'm trying to say, is as scary as it's going to be, Dan, I almost want Maki Pitolo to get hit hard. And if he can survive that, I think you're going to start feeling really good. Even if he's, kind of getting his legs back and has to wrestle, I'm going to slowly start going from shocked if I bet on Pitolo to smiling, because I know that now that was it. That was Darren Stewart's chance. And whatever gas tank he was trying to save, Dan, that excitement just brought it out of him. And now it's a downhill trend against a Hawaiian who tends to build. So no matter how you break it down, it does feel like KO or bust.
Look, Dan Tom, at the end of the day, I truly respect Darren Stewart's knockout ability. And I mean, he's a real threat. He can knock people out with punches, with elbows, with knees, the whole bit. But man, I got to go with the guy that I consider to be the more well-rounded fighter. And here at 185 pounds, Pitolo's finally in the right weight class. I feel like he's going to have a lot of success here. And as long as he's not knocked unconscious, I think he wins this fight Saturday night, Dan Tom.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the canaries in the coal mine that I've been stating, and I'm gonna ride that train here with Pitolo. I think it's KO or bust for Stewart.
Dan Tom, I know the fans really want to hear about this lightweight clash between Beneil Daryush and Scott Holtzman. I mean, what an exciting fight. Tell me the last time you were like, nah, I'm not going to watch this Beneil Daryush fight. You know what I mean? I feel like he's one of the most underrated lightweights on the entire roster. And at one point, and people might disagree with this, but it is what it is. I don't really care. I thought he was a top 5 guy at lightweight. I mean, do you remember when he was on his big win streak and he beat Michael Johnson, who was the number 5 lightweight on planet Earth at the time? Well, to me, if you beat the number 5 guy, you are the number 5 guy. So back then, back in Nashville, when he beat Michael Johnson, I thought Beneil Daryush was a top 5 guy back then. But, now it's one of those things where and he's been through the ups and downs, and I feel like he's come out on the right side. Like when you see some of the downs this guy's had, the Alex Hernandez fight, which they fight 10 times. I got Beneil at least 7 to 8 times, of that. But Alex got his one little moment. The Edson fight, Benny's winning most of that fight. makes a beautiful read on the takedown entry, throws that flying knee, knocks him out. So Benny's taken his fair share of bad losses, but man, his wins are so good. I mean, this is a guy, he beat Carlos Diego Ferreira, right? He finished Tony Martin. He finished Drakkar Klose. He finished Drew Dober. Like, Benny's a badass, man. He beat Rashid Magomedov back when Rashid was undefeated in the UFC. He beat James Vick back when James Vick was undefeated in the UFC. The Jim Miller win. I mean, this guy, I can go on forever listing Benny's resume. And personally, I'll just admit a little bias. I am a huge fan of Beneil. I was there at his UFC debut in Gwinnett, Georgia, when he knocked out Charlie Brenneman and then choked him out, knocked him down with a punch, took his back, choked him out. And it was first fight of the night, so no one was there. You could hear the crack of that left hand on Charlie Brenneman's chin when he dropped him. I was like, okay, this is a guy I'm going to keep my eye on. And he hasn't failed to deliver as far as I'm concerned. Now, Scotty Holtzman, interestingly enough, I was at his debut as well when he fought the Greek kid. What's the name of the Greek kid again?
Christodoulou or something like that.
Yeah, Anthony Christodoulou. Yeah. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up because, look, he fought Anthony Christodoulou the same night that Benny beat Michael Johnson in Nashville. So Scotty's making his debut. He's the first fight of the night, and Benny's the co-main event, fighting a top 5 guy. So it's interesting to see that now, 4 years later, they meet here, and this is going to be one hell of a lightweight clash, Dan Tom.
I think so too. I think, we'll talk about the line movement in a second, but judging by that alone, I think it's gauging people's interest, if you know what I mean. Because I'm seeing it move on my screen just within recent history. But I can see why. Again, you mentioned it. These guys are action fighters. Scott Holtzman, he's been relegated to a lot of, not standout matchups in a Shark Tank division. So perhaps to the casuals, he might not be as familiar, but us hardcores, no Scotty Holtzman's going to come to fight. He's worth watching all the time, and he's going to get another southpaw. I believe, depending on how you consider, I'm not sure if Michael McBride was. He was also really short notice. I'm not going to comment on the level or be rude here, or the switch dancing Alan Patrick. If you really don't count those, Holtzman technically has a winning record against southpaws. He beat Jim Miller his last time out. Of course, he has a victory over Daryl Horcher, lost to Drew Dober, as you mentioned. You mentioned his name when you were talking about Beneil Dariush's resume. But yeah, it's almost like that y'all must have forgot thing with Beneil Dariush, because, we're thinking he's done, and this Alex Hernandez kid knocks him out, and whoa, Alex Hernandez maybe is something, and then now he's not aging as well, and yada yada yada, and you can go and spin your perspective that way. You got Beneil Dariush over here, though, Dan. He's growing out his grays and he's getting wins. He don't give up about what you think. You know what I'm saying? He's getting out there and he's getting it done. So I think I like that. I think a lot of people seem to be liking that. And if you look at Beneil, Daryush, not just for his grappling creds that he rolled onto the scene with, but the guys put in the work. I know people kind of scoff, or maybe they don't take it seriously at the very least, of ranks in Muay Thai. But regardless of what you feel about rankings in martial arts, they show time, they show progression. And under a guy like Rafael Cordero, you can bet it counts for something. So, yeah, man. If you can't tell by my voice, I like Beneil Dariush here as far as a pick. But as far as action goes, I see this fight having a lot of action.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And speaking of progression, I mean, Scotty Holtzman won 5 of his last 6, really coming into his own. I mean, he's a guy that throws big bombs on the feet. And now, he's been able to, take that former pro hockey background, translate it into MMA. He's a bruiser out there, man. I mean, he can take guys down. He's so damn durable. Never been finished in the UFC before. And he's a guy where, if some of these past issues that Benny's had come to light, such as maybe the chin maybe doesn't take the best shot, or maybe he starts gassing out after a early success, that's where a guy like Scott Holtzman could possibly take over in the second and third round. So interestingly enough, when I talk about Beneil Dariush fights from a betting perspective, I always like to remove my bias because I'm a huge Beneil Dariush fan. I love Benny Dariush. It's just that you're looking at this -185 line, and it might be right. It might be a little high. I just know that I don't want to lay that chalk on Benny against this level opponent. Not because he can't beat him. He's been beating this level guy his entire career. But Scotty's not just some cold body that's going to come in here, take a knee the first round, and get to tell his friends about that 195 Beneil Dariush. Like, Scotty's coming in here to win. Scotty's a gamer. So for me to bet Dariush, I need a a lower price, basically, is what I'm saying here. So I actually think this is a dog or pass situation, but my pure pick will be Beneil Dariush here.
I don't hate any of the things you're saying. I still got to run it through my proverbial comb, but my interest went a lot less as soon as the line moved away from its opener at minus 160 and started going north. Now, if you want to talk about minus 150 or lower, then that's more my range as far as points of entry. But you're right. Scotty's game, and my thing with Beneil is what usually separates him to me is athleticism. And say what you will about Scott's level of competition, perhaps his age, even for a lightweight. The dude's an athlete, and that's what's kept him afloat, and that's been the kind of the crux, the one thing missing, and hence the proverbial kryptonite, in my opinion, with Beneil Dariush. So buyer beware there.
Yeah, I mean, look, the books think that, when they open at minus 160, they're thinking he wins, 6 out of 10 times, which I think is pretty fair. But the way the public is moving up, we're almost at minus 200. I mean, the public is starting to think that, hey, like he wins a lot more than that. We're thinking more like 66%. And even though that sounds like, oh, it's only a 6% differential, that's a big deal when you're talking about value, when you're talking about betting lines. And I agree more with Vegas. I slightly favor him. I don't think he should quite be in the minus 200 range, even though he's got minus 200 type skills. I mean, that black belt in jiu-jitsu, that left body kick from the southpaw stance, his hands, his veteran experience, he can mix in takedowns too. Beneil is the complete package. Beneil is one of the best fighters on planet Earth. It's just that the thing is going against him. The durability is not what it once was. And also the gas tank. Sometimes, like, Benny is a killer. Benny will go out there and try to get you out of there in highlight reel fashion, and sometimes it'll happen. But when it doesn't happen, not that he's not tough. He's tough as hell. He will dig deep. And honestly, he went out there in Mexico City elevation and beat Rashid Magomedov 30-27, which one doesn't simply do. But there wasn't much resistance in that fight. Scotty's going to give him that resistance. So I'm curious to see what happens if this fight does hit the second and third round.
Me too. I think you outlined it beautifully. That's the kind of trap here for Beneil bettors, right? Is that he does really well. And yeah, Beneil's the better wrestler, definitely the better grappler, right? But if it might not matter if Holtzman's good enough to defend, because if he's good enough to defend and he makes, Beneil Dariush exert, even more energy because he's having to take down an athlete that's explosive as opposed to just, your stand-in guy. Well, then, yeah, man, the late second round and third rounds look very scary territory. So I co-sign.
And look, I feel like all the weapons I already mentioned for Beneil, his hands, his left body kick, his jiu-jitsu, that's all there, and that's all well and good. But the reason that I'm leaning Beneil, and because I feel like if the Nick Lentz fight never happened for Scott Holtzman, I might actually come out here and take Holtzman as an underdog pick. It's just that the Nick Lentz fight kind of let me know that, hey, even if Scott Holtzman gets a knockdown, even if Scott Holtzman is rocking him during every exchange, Beneil can always go back to that double leg, reach in the back pocket, pull out that wrestling. Even he doesn't have a wrestling background, but he's a world-class black belt. I mean, you remember when Crone Gracie was on his jiu-jitsu run and enter Beneil Dariush goes out there. What was it? Was it a draw? Was it a controversial decision? So basically, I don't remember the exact scoring, but it was like so like competitive that everyone was like, hey, who's this young phenom Benny Dariush, right? So basically, if shit's not going well standing, if he's getting rocked, if he's getting wobbled at all, he can always go back to that last resort and make it a grindy type fight. So for that reason, I lean Benny Dariush. At the current line, I actually do think it's a dog or pass situation, all bias aside.
I completely agree there. And also watch out for that Benny clinch.
Oh yeah, beautiful knees from the clinch, and man, when he breaks away with those big shots, I love Benny Dariush, but man, Scotty's a gamer. I've been impressed with the progression of Scotty's career and just the fact that he's like 36 years old, and it doesn't look to me like he's on the way out. It looks to me like he's in the best form that he's ever been in his entire career. So I like to see that. It looks like he's getting more comfortable, more confident inside that octagon. So I'm glad they gave him this kind of opportunity. And this is truly the kind of lightweight clash for me personally, Dan Tom, where I'm going to sit back and enjoy it as a fan. Like, I want to know exactly what happens when Scotty and Benny face off. One of my all-time favorite lightweights in Benny, and one of the, I don't want to say one of the brightest up-and-comers, because like I said, he is 36, but a guy that's been consistent, a guy that's stuck around, a guy that's not washing out anytime soon, a guy that still feels like, hey, I want to crack the top 15 before it's all said and done. I want people to know my name when it's all said and done. He comes out here and gets a win over Beneil Daryush. It's going to be a step in the right direction, Dan.
And before we get out of here, I think this also could be a good contender for fight of the night if, Tim Means or Strapoli or like a Hack Press Munoz or Tucker James doesn't take it. But I feel like the leader there could be Daryush Holtzman for my money.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank every single person that watched this. Thank you so much to all our supporters, our fans, our listeners, everybody. You guys are truly amazing. Make sure you follow us at line_movement. Comment down below. Let us know what you think. Tell Dan Tom how good looking he is. Tell me how wrong I am. Whatever the case may be, we truly appreciate all your feedback. Thank you so much to our producer, Jordan. You're the man. Thank you to our graphics, our editors, everybody. You guys are the real MVPs. Everybody behind the scenes, Joe, Dan, James. Thank you all so much. We will be back next week. Got another epic card. Got a pay-per-view. Rumor has it we might be going live. Might be. So stay tuned. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the fights, and we will speak soon.
Hey, Line Movement audience, if you like what you saw, be sure to click on the video's link on the screen.